This video will demonstrate the homework assignment for Chapter 2, Level 3. So we need two files for this assignment. The first one that we need is this parts file, so I'm going to download that. And if you get this message, just click Enable Editing, and then I'm going to go ahead and open up the other file that we need. So I'm going to go back to Blackboard, and on step 7 it says we need this demand spreadsheet. So I'm going to open up that one and have that ready for when I need it. Okay, and I'm getting this Enable Editing, so I'll just open that. Now I'm going to toggle between the two. Oops, it didn't take it. I'm going to toggle back to the first spreadsheet. Alright, so it says to go ahead and save this parts worksheet, so I'm going to give that a name and save it. File, Save As. And I'm going to go to my documents. You can save it wherever you want. Alright, so I have this demos folder that I'm demonstrating homework in, and I'm going to go ahead and save that as CKG Parts Analysis. Oops, didn't get that saved right. I'm going to do that again. CKG Parts Analysis. And I'll hit Save. Okay, step 2 of page 158 says to modify the format of the data on the worksheet so that the zero values are displayed. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. You'll notice here, for example, on cell C7 it has a dash, and that's because it's a zero value. So it's telling you to format it so it doesn't have a zero value. So the way that you can do that, since all of these are numbers, you can just grab these columns up here. So I'm clicking on B. You have to actually click on B, click and hold, and drag across all of those columns. Let go, and then I'm going to right click and hit Format Cells. And I'm going to change that to a number, and I don't want any decimal places, and I don't want a separator. And I'll say, and then I'll click OK. And you'll notice how now those cells turned to 0. Another way to do that, this is still highlighted because I haven't clicked outside of it. You can also format cells doing, let's see, I always do the right click. You can also format it using the number group, and the number group is right here. And this is called a number, it's the launcher button. It's right here, this little one in the corner. You might be familiar with that from other programs. And when I click on that little arrow in the corner, it also brings up the number formatting, the tools for formatting a cell. But once again, I almost always use the right click and then hit Format. Alright, so that's step 2. And then on step 3, it wants us to calculate the high and low limits of the bearing demand by customer. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom of this worksheet, and I'm going to create a formula. So we've learned in some previous chapters the minimum number and the maximum number. So right here, I'm going to say that I'm going to label this as the low, and I'm going to label this as high, and I'm going to create a formula that I can copy across. So the formula is going, if I want the lowest value in the column, I can use the minimum function. So I'm going to type equal to indicate a formula, equals min. So here's the minimum, equals minimum. And then I have to tell, and remember this gives you a formula help here, equals the minimum, and then I need to put a range of cells. What number to what number do I want to look at? What cell reference do I want to look at? So I'm going to scroll to the top, click and hold, and I'm going to grab cell B4, click and hold, and drag down to indicate I'm getting all of those cell references, all the way down to 33. And when I'm done, I can just hit enter. And let's look at that formula again. So I've got the minimum of cell B4 to B33, and it returned the value of 2 because 2 is the smallest number in that range of cells. So let's do the high. So high, I'm going to use the max function. So I'll click equals max, and when I do that, the max function comes up. So I'm going to double click that to select it, and then it gives you a hint again. So equals max, open parentheses, and then you have to tell it the range of cells. So once again, I'm going to scroll to the top, grab cell B4, click and hold, and drag it down. All right, and when you're doing that, I'm not sure if you can see this on the video, but it's showing it here. And then I can just hit enter to select it. Returns the value of 15, but here's the formula. Equals max, cell B4 all the way to B33. All right, so I don't need to use any sort of absolute cell reference or mixed cell reference. I'm going to just copy those formulas across, and because I'm using a relative cell reference, the program will move to the next column automatically as I copy it across. So I can copy both formulas across at the same time. I'm going to click and hold on the first one, drag down, let go of it, so I've selected both cells, grab the little dot in the corner, let my cursor turn into a dark plus sign, click and hold, and drag it across. Alright, so when I do that, it calculates, it selects the lowest and the highest number in each of those cell references. So if I look at those formulas, if I click over here, you can see that Excel knew to move it to column F, then column G, and it did the same thing for the max. And it does that because that is a relative cell reference as opposed to an absolute cell reference. I did not want to anchor that. I wanted it to move the column across. Okay, on step 4 on page 159, the instructions tell us to create a simulation using the high and low limits. So we have the high and low limits here for each of the different customers, and of course this is a customer number here. So for each of those customers, it wants us to create a high and low limit on a separate spreadsheet. So I'm going to go ahead and click down here on sheet 1, and I'm going to double click it so I can rename it, and I'm going to rename that simulation. And I'll hit enter to accept it, and what I'm going to do, actually I want this format, so I'm going to do this differently. Let's go back. We can still call this simulation. Well, actually I'm going to delete it. I'm going to delete that. Okay, so you can see how you can delete a formula. Let's copy this instead so we can retain this format with the customer numbers. So the way that you do that is you right click on the tab down here at the bottom called Bearing Data. So I'm going to right click it, and I'm going to tell it to move or copy. I'm going to put this up here so we can see it. So when you right click on the tab, you get this move or copy tool, and I want to click create a copy, and I'll just tell it to move to the end, which is the only choice really. I don't want it to copy over itself, and then I'll just say OK. And you'll notice what you get down here in the tab, you get this Bearing Data 2. So I'm going to double click, and all that is, it's an exact copy of the first tabbed worksheet. So I'm going to click on Bearing Data 2, double click it, and rename that simulation. Alright, so now I have an exact copy. It's set up exactly like it is for each of my customers, and I'm going to get rid of the data that's in there. So I'm going to click and hold on cell B4, drag across all the way down to the bottom of that data, and I'm going to get rid of those high and low limits as well. I don't need them anymore, and I'm going to hit delete. Now I could have used those high and low limits, left those intact, and grabbed them from the other one, but the reason I wouldn't want to do that is because you can see I got rid of this, so it actually wouldn't work. So we need to create a formula that's going to go grab this data that's down here at the bottom of the Bearing Data tabbed worksheet, and I'm going to use this data here. So I'm going to reference that. So the formula for that is to generate a number using the high and low limits for each of those customers. So the way that we do that is we type a formula called random between. So that's basically what it's called, rand between. So I'm going to type in equals rand. And you'll notice when I do that I get a rand here, but I want the one that's between, and you can do that. It will just generate a random number if you choose that. But I want random between because I'm going to use a high and low number. So I'm going to double click on that function, and I get this rand between with an open parentheses. So then I need to click on Bearing Data. I click on Bearing Data, and I tell it that I want this number, and then you have to put a and then type a comma, and you'll notice when I just hit the comma it comes up here and grabs that, puts a comma up here in the formula bar, and then I'm going to tell it I want it to be between B35 and B36, and it's going to grab that, and then I can just hit enter to accept it. So let's look at that formula. So I've got the function randomize a number between the value that's in B35 and between the value that's in B36. Now watch what happens if I try to copy this formula the way that I created it. If I copy this across, I get these random numbers. I'm getting C35, D36, and if I copy this down, now I'm going to copy all of that down and see if I get the right results here. Notice what happens. I'm going to make those bigger. I'm getting the hash marks because, oh, it's doing something funny here. I'm getting those hash marks because it doesn't really know where to look for the data. So I'm going to delete all of this. I just wanted to illustrate, so I can illustrate the point here, that I got an error. And the reason is because I did not put any sort of absolute value into the formula or any sort of mixed value into it. So it knew what to do going across. The program didn't know what to do going down. And so I need to put a mixed cell reference so that I can anchor the 35 to the 36. Because if you look over here, if I tried to copy that down and I didn't put it as an absolute value, it was trying to move it to 37, 38, 39, 40, so on and so forth. So you can see the difference between absolute value and a relative cell reference. What I have here is a relative cell reference. So I just need to go edit this formula. And I want it to be able to move across B, C, D, and E without me having to create those individually. And you see that it copied that across very nicely because of the relative cell reference. So I don't want to anchor the column value, but I want to anchor the 35 and the 36 so it doesn't try to move down into, over here I'm going to click on this again, into row 37 and 38. Alright, so I don't need to rewrite that whole formula, I just need to turn it into a mixed cell reference. So I'm going to come up here into the formula bar, and I'm going to just grab that B35 cell reference and hit F4. And when I do that, it put a $sign in front of the B. I don't want a $sign in front of the B. Mixed cell reference. I'm going to hit F4 again, and now I have a $sign in just in front of the 35. So it's going to anchor row 35. Alright, so I hit enter for it to take that. Now I need to do the same thing for 36, because if I don't anchor 36, it's going to try to move it down. So a mixed cell reference once again. I'm going to highlight the B36 and hit F4 to toggle. Turned it into an absolute cell reference. I need a mixed cell reference. So I hit F4 one more time. And now I'm anchoring cell 36, or row 36, but it's going to let me move the column over because I don't have a $sign in front of the B. Okay, so I'm going to hit enter to accept that. Now I can copy that across. Should know how to copy by now. Just grab the little corner, copy across. So now if I look at any of these cell reference, I can see that when I'm in column D, I'm getting a column D reference for the bearing data cell references. So now I can click and hold all the way across from here. Click and hold. So I'm highlighting all of those cells. I'm going to grab the little dot in the corner here, click and hold and drag it down, and this time I should get a better result. Alright, there we go. That looks much better. Now you will get a different result than I got because it's randomly generating those numbers. So don't try to have the same exact numbers that I have on this video, nor will you necessarily get the same exact numbers for the example of the solution that you were given with the homework assignment. Alright, so be aware of that. You will get different results because it's randomly selecting the numbers between that data set. Alright, the second part of step 4 says that they want you to copy this. You want to keep the simulation randomization intact. So we're going to copy this and paste it into another spreadsheet. So the easiest way to do that is we're going to go ahead and right click on the simulation tab, and I'm going to move or copy again. And I'll just say move to the end, create a copy. So I just right clicked on that tab down there, click OK, and now I get a tab called Simulation with a 2 next to it. And the book tells you that they want you to name that Simulation Data 1. That's in step 4. So I'm going to double click that and call it Simulation Data 1. And just hit enter to accept it. Now I'm sitting there in that Simulation Data 1, but if I look at this, I still have a whole bunch of formulas in there. And this time, and what it also tells you is to copy it with just values. So I didn't want to create the whole, all of the format of it, so that's a nice way to just copy it. And what I'm going to do, once again, I'm going to click and hold, drag all of this down so I can get just values in there instead of formulas. You'll notice I have formulas in each of those cells because I just copied that simulation worksheet. So I'm going to hit delete. Now I don't have anything in there, but I want to go back to the simulation worksheet. I'm going to click and hold starting on cell B4, drag across and drag all the way down with all of those data set, with all of that data set. Okay, I'm going to right click and copy. And I'm going to click on Simulation Data 1. I'm going to click on cell B4, and this time I'm going to right click and paste special. So when I do paste special, I'm going to get some different results. And this time I don't want to copy the formulas, I want to copy just the values. So this is a huge useful tool because sometimes you can't do functions on cells that have formulas in them and you want just the values. So I'm going to choose just the values and click OK. So you'll notice when I click on cell B4 now, the result is just the value that was there from the from the worksheet. I don't have a formula in there now. So that's what it was talking about when it said to copy just the values. Let's click back on the Simulation tab, and I can just hit Escape. You see how it's still trying to say that that's some values to copy. I'm going to just hit Escape. It will make that go away. Or you could have clicked out of it. It would make it go away as well. And you'll notice when I click back on any of these cells, they all have formulas in them. So this simulation tab has stayed intact, and that's what we want. So I'm going to click back to the Simulation Data 1, and I'm going to do some calculations on it now. Okay, on step 5 of page 159, it tells us on the Simulation Data 1 worksheet, in an adjacent column, calculate the total demand for day for all 10 customers. So I'm going to put up here total demand. You could call it whatever you want. I think the example that I attached was daily needs, so I guess I'll just keep it like that. It doesn't quite fit, so I'm going to double click that so it fits. Double click between the L and the M, the little line in between, and it will size that column automatically. And now I'm going to click Auto Sum because I want to sum the total for each of those, the daily, what do I need per day for each of the different customers. So I'm going to click Auto Sum. I don't want it to grab that. Excel thinks that's a number, but it really is just a number for a day, and I don't want that to be included. So I click and hold here, and I can retell it where to start the calculation. So then it tells it B4 to K4. That's what I want. I'm going to hit Enter to accept it. Notice the formula, you close the parentheses, hit Enter. I didn't have to do that because the formula does it for me when I get that help. Alright, I'm going to copy that down for all of the days. Alright, you may not have got 73 because these were randomly generated numbers. I want you to be aware you may get different results than me, and that's okay. As long as when I check your homework you have the right formulas in there, we'll be good to go. Alright, so the daily needs, I'm going to make that just a little bit smaller, and I can click on this daily needs and hit wrap text, and then that looks a little bit nicer. You can also center that, doing just a little bit of formatting here. Alright, so I like the way that looks. The book doesn't tell you to do that, but just something I wanted to do. I don't like to have data with, great big headings and then small numbers in between. It takes up too much space, especially when you're working with a large spreadsheet. So different things that you can do. Alright, then it asks us to calculate the daily mean, median, mode, and standard deviation for the combined requirements for all 10 customers. So here's what we calculated the daily needs for each of the 10 customers. And I'm going to come down to the bottom of that and do some calculations here. So I need a mean, median, mean, mode, medium, and standard deviation for those. So I'm just going to put a label here and call it mean, mode. I'm going to label these in standard deviation. Alright, so we're going to use some formulas to calculate that. So I'm going to hit equals, mean, medium. Oops, I made a mistake. So what I need to do is the mean is just the average. So I'm going to start that over. So I'm going to click on that cell, type equals the average, and there's the function that comes up. So I want the average, and I need to give it a range of cells. What cells am I trying to calculate the average on? So I'm going to go to the top, and here it's the column L. We want to know what the average is of those daily needs from each of the customers. So I'm going to click and hold on cell L4, click and hold and drag down, and that's the cell references I want, and I will just hit enter. Let's look at that again. So I have the average, the formula is equals the average of L4 to L33, and it returns a value of 62. Now once again, you might get some different values here based on what's in this column. I'm going to move that over. I don't really want it under K8 because that kind of looks like I'm calculating the average for K, even though if I check the formula I can see that it's L. So I'm going to move that. So I can move that by taking my cursor, kind of going into the middle, hovering over the bottom of that, and it turns into this double-sided arrow. I'm going to click and hold, and I can just move it across. So that's a fast way to move it. Alright, so we calculated the average for column L. Now we need to calculate the mode for column L. So this time I'm going to type equals mode, and I want the one that has an equal mode dot single. So I'm going to click that, and once again I have to tell it what cells I want to calculate the mode on. And remember, the mode in statistical terms is the number that occurs most often in the set of data. So I'm going to just click and hold and drag down from the beginning of L all the way to the bottom of column L, which is cell L33, hit enter, and it returns a value of 50. So in this data set, 50 occurs the most often. Alright, now I need to calculate the median, and the median is just the number that occurs if I numbered the set of data from the lowest number to the highest number, it would be the number that occurs in the middle of that set of data. So I'm going to type equals median, and there's the function. It shows up. Let me scoop this up. Equals median. I'm going to double click that to accept it. Once again, it's giving me a hint. I need to tell it what cells I want to calculate the median on. Same cells. Just hit enter to accept that, and I get that formula, equals the median of L4 to L33. And finally I was asked to calculate the standard deviation. So I'm going to type equals and start typing in standard deviation, and I want the standard deviation .s. This is the most common one that you use. So I'm going to double click that function, and once again I have to give it the cells that I want to look at for the standard deviation, and then hit enter. Alright, so the standard deviation returned a value of 9.708. Now let's think again, what does the standard deviation mean? The standard deviation is just measures the amount that a set of values differs from the average. So how far away, and average and mean are the same thing. You saw me get a little bit, I forgot. I was trying to type in equals mean, but in this case it's just equals average. So the standard deviation is just, it measures the amount that a set of values differs from the mean or the average. So the larger the standard deviation, the larger the deviation. The smaller the standard deviation, the smaller the deviation. So you're going to get, the smaller the number, you're going to get more of that nice rounded normal looking curve as opposed to a standard deviation that's kind of lopsided, if we were looking at curves again. Alright, and finally in step 5 it tells us to shade our data so it kind of stands out. So I'm going to click and hold, and you can do it different ways. You could draw a little table around it. I'm going to maybe do that, draw a border, outside borders. So I can click that. That was a double outside border, but that's okay. No, it wasn't. It's just a single outside border. I could also put some color into that. So you have fill color and you have text color. But I think I'll go ahead and I'll just choose yellow, and I'll let that turn yellow. So that's my calculated value. This is a calculated value as well. So it told us to highlight any of the calculated values. And this time I'll choose a different color for that. Maybe I'll choose blue. Alright, so different ways you can format that. Now we're moving on to step 6. And it wants us to go into another column and include a ranking of the data 1 to 100 so that the day with the least total demand has a rank of 1. And it also wants us to use cell shading when we do that. So I'm being asked, I'm going to ask the program to tell me where does that number 73 fall in terms of high to low in this whole set of data. Alright, so the way that I do that, I'm going to go into a new column and I'm going to label this column rank. Make it a little smaller. Maybe I'll make it a little bigger. And then I'm going to start a formula. So this is going to be equals rank, and I'm going to use the rank.eq. Double click that. And I have to tell it what cell I want to look at and then in what range of cells I want to look at. So I want it to rank the number that's sitting in cell L4, and so I'm telling it to rank that cell, the value that's in that cell. So that's the cell I want to value, and then I hit comma, and then I have to tell it what cells I want to look at for it to rank it. So I'm going to go from cell L4 all the way down to the bottom of the data set. And I'm going to come up so I can see that. So I have that whole data set selected in column L, and I need to do something with that. When I copy this down, because obviously we're going to rank each of these numbers, I don't want the program to try to move it down as it's looking at each one. I want to anchor it, so I need to put a mixed cell reference in there once again. So I'm going to put a mixed cell reference. I hit my F4 and it puts the dollar signs in there. We can see it up here and we can see it here. I'm going to hit it again because I want it to move L4. I want it to look at L4, then I want it to look at L5. So I don't need to put it, I need that to be a relative cell reference. And then I need it to, if I happen to want to look at something, I'm going to just tell it to, I could put an absolute value in here. I don't think it would make a difference. But this time I'm going to just use a mixed cell reference again. And then I'm going to put a comma. So I'm telling it to rank that number in this series of numbers, and I want it to do it in ascending order. So you can type a 1 there, or you can double click the help there, and it puts it in there. And then you can hit enter to accept it. You can also close your parentheses and close and hit enter. So you can either hit enter when you're done entering all the values of the formula, or you can do the close parentheses and hit enter. It doesn't matter. Alright, so I can see that that number 73 has a rank of 27. So I'm going to copy that formula down so I can rank all of those data numbers in that set. Once again, do not freak out. You will get a different ranking because you had different values in here because they were randomly generated. The important thing here is that you use the correct formula. Alright, we also were supposed to highlight that, so I'm going to highlight that set of data and give it a different color, and maybe this time I'll use purple. Alright, step 7 on page 159 asks us to calculate a listing of the top and bottom 5 daily combined demands from the 100 simulated instances. So I'm going to come over here, and this is basically your large and small function. We can use the large and small function to look at a large amount of data and have it tell us what are the top 5 and the smallest in the top 5, or the largest numbers in a set of data, or the smallest numbers in a set of data. Alright, so I'm going to come over here. In order to use that large and small function, I have to have a ranking set. So I need the top 5 and the bottom 5. So I'm going to just type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Alright, we'll scoot this over so we can see it. So I'm going to use those cell references in my formula. It would be cell 04, 05, 06, 07, and 08. All right, now I'm going to label this the top 5. I like to use capital numbers. And then the bottom 5. All right, the formula I'm going to do, I want to tell it that I want to look at cell L4 in the whole rank of L4 to 103. So I'm going to type in the function equals large. Oops, if I type it right. There it is. It comes up. I'm going to double click it and it gives me some hints. So I equal large and I have to look at an array of numbers and then comma, and I have to tell it what one do I want it to be. So the K becomes this cell reference. And when I copy it down, it moves for each one of those. So what set of numbers do I want to look at? All right, I have my daily needs. I could simulate all of this, but since I have done this calculation here, I'm just going to use that. So I'm going to click on cell L4 and go all the way down to L103. All right, down to cell L33, and then I have to tell it, put a comma, because you can see here in the help that there's a comma there, and then I want this cell reference, that I want it to be the highest, the number 1 reference. Then I can close parentheses and hit enter. So we can see that you get a result. In my data set, I get a result of 83. Alright, if I were to copy that down, I might have some problems because I want it to stay within those cell references. So I need to do a mixed cell reference here. So I'm going to come up here into the formula and highlight L4 and L33 and hit F4. Oops, it's not doing it. Let me try that again. I have to do them one at a time. It didn't know what to do. So I'm going to do L4 first, turn it into a mixed cell reference, then do L33 and turn that into a mixed cell reference. I'm just hitting it one at a time. Alright, I have to hit enter for it to take it. That's what I was doing wrong. And then L33, I need to turn that into, I'm hitting F4 to turn it into a mixed cell reference. It's just not doing it for me. Let me try it again. There it goes. I can highlight all of those. Alright, I want a mixed cell reference in the 33, and then I'm going to just hit enter to take that. Alright, so here's my formula. It's equals large, L4 to L33, and then I'm going to reference cell 04 so it will get that ranking of 1. Alright, now I can copy that down, and I get all of my values there. Once again, you will get different values because you have a different set of numbers. Alright, now I need to use the small function to get the bottom 5 in that set of numbers. So I'm going to hit equals small and do the same thing. Here's the small function, and I have to tell it what array of numbers do I want to look at. So I'm going to highlight all of those once again. And then I can just hit a comma, come back up here so you can see it, and I want it to reference the 1 again, so I'm getting the top bottom 5. So I'm referencing 04, close my parentheses and hit enter. Right, need to turn that into absolute cell references again. So I'm going to hit F4, mixed cell reference, and hit enter. I'm going to go back up because I noticed I grabbed the first L4 and just hit F4 and make that go away and hit enter. So let's look at the formula. So we can see that we have equals small L4. So I'm grabbing, I want it to rank this number in that set of data from 30, oh, I have a mistake there. L4 from L33, L4 to L33. I'm sorry. I'm going to just click this again, hit F4 again, and hit enter. All right, let me check this one. Yeah, L4 to L33 in this set of data, pick out the highest number and the top bottom numbers. Okay, so there's the small, and I'm going to copy that down. So it's actually good when I make a mistake when I'm demonstrating this. Maybe a little confusing to you, but I can see that I made a mistake in my formula. I wouldn't expect to get 40 as a result in all of my answers there. And so I'm going to look in my formula. What did I do wrong? And I can see what I did wrong. I anchored the 04, so it couldn't move down to 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the O column. So I'm going to highlight that 04 in the formula and hit F4 so it just becomes a regular cell reference. Now I need the L33 though to have that there. Okay, there we go. So you can correct it by hand or you can correct it that way as well. So I'm going to hit enter. So I'm looking from cell L4 to L33 and I'm wanting it to rank based on the lowest number and then 2, 3, 4, and 5, so the bottom 5. Now I can copy that down and I should get a different result. Alright, and sure enough I did. Once again, you will get different results than I got. Alright, it tells us to highlight that into a table. So I'm going to just put a border around that and perhaps change it a different color. Maybe I'll just make it yellow. Oops, didn't take it. I'm going to highlight it again. Come up here to the fill and I will choose yellow for that again. Alright, the other thing you can do, instead of just drawing an outside border, maybe I want all of it. So I'm going to click in my font group, I'm going to click this, which is your border tool, and I'm going to tell it I want all borders. So now you can see what that looks like. It gives you lines on all of the cells. Right, on step 8, it wants us to recommend a target inventory level needed for a 5-day period based on the following. They want us to use each day supply will be equal to the average daily demand for all locations combined plus 2 standard deviations. And it tells you some bulleted points in the middle there that your standard deviations might not already be an integer, so they want us to round it to the nearest whole number and then calculate the daily demand plus 2 standard deviations. And then we're to put that right here below what we just calculated here, the top, bottom, and the top 5. And we can call this demand. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to put that right here. And we're going to make a formula for that. So I need to find out what is my recommended inventory level. So it tells us that we're going to use the mean and the standard deviations. And remember, we calculated the mean and the standard deviation down here, so we're going to be using those numbers. And it also tells me to round it up to a whole number. Right, so we have a function that will do that. It's called roundup. So I'm going to hit equals round. And you'll notice when I start typing round, I get some choices here. I get round, round down, and round up. Well, I want round up. And then I have to tell it what numbers I want to do that to. So it opens the parentheses because it's ready for a cell reference. So I'm going to come down here. I need to grab the average, which is the mean. So the average of the daily demand. And then I'm going to come up here, so it's getting that cell reference. You can see it here. Plus, I need 2 of the standard deviations. So I'm going to put plus 2 times, and then the cell reference of the standard deviation. So here's the standard deviation. So I want 2 of those, so I'm multiplying it times 2 of L38, which is the standard deviation cell reference. Then I put a comma. So you'll notice I put my cell references in here. Then I put a comma, and I have to tell it how many digits do I want that to round up. And I want it to round to a whole number, so I put, oh, my comma didn't take it, and then to 0. Close my parentheses, and that's my formula. So let's look at that formula up here in the formula bar. So I rounded up the average, or the mean, plus 2 times the standard deviation cell reference. And then put 0, and I have a mistake in there. Let me get rid of that. I just needed it to be 2 times L38. And then I want it to round, comma, so I have to tell it how many do I want it to round up to. I could have put a 2 there and you see the different results, but I'm going to put a 0, and I'm going to correct that and hit enter. Alright, so it's 2 times the standard deviation. That's what we're getting there. So that is the recommendation. I need to put some information around that. So the Behring recommended 5-day inventory, and let me type recommended right. 5-day inventory. Okay, kind of don't like the way that looks, so I'm going to move this formula down, and I'm going to just show you some different ways you can do this. Right here, I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here, hold my Alt key down, and I can hit enter, and it will do it like that. And maybe bring that out just a little bit. Then I can move this up again. I could even put it up here if I wanted. The Behring 5-day inventory level is 82 based on my data. So I'm going to do some highlighting on that too, and yours might look a little bit different. You make it look however you want, and we'll just turn that purple as well, and we're going to draw a border around it. And I think that I won't put any other highlighting in that. Right. I might put a colon here. Okay, so you can format that however you like, however you think that will look nice. Okay, I just realized that you really might get some different results than I did because I'm going to change the way this looks, because I noticed in step 4 as I was re-looking this assignment over that we were supposed to simulate 100 instances, and I could have just copied, when I was in simulation, I could have just copied this down to be 100 instances, and you can see how I would get different results if I had done that. So if I had actually copied this down, so I've got formulas in there, remember? I'm in the simulation tab, and I can make this copy down because I'm getting it from the very first high and low data in the simulation tab, and I could have done more instances of that. So I'm going to just show you. I could have taken this down to about 100 more instances. Then I would have been working with a much bigger data set too. And you can see, because I have that formula in there, that it's going to simulate that for however much I want to simulate. So I just wanted to point that out. Here you can copy this 2930, you can just copy that down so that it puts what line that's on. Okay, so you can see that I have 100 instances there. So that's what I did wrong. If you followed this video doing it the way that I showed you, that's okay. You're going to get just some smaller data results. And I think that we'll just continue with the example, even though I forgot to copy down 100 instances of that simulation. Then remember, we copied all of that data in here as values into our data set so that we could work with the actual numbers. So we'll get a little bit different than perhaps you would have got otherwise. Now, I don't like the way this looks. I noticed when I did that I obviously made that cell bigger. So I'm going to do that different. I still want to keep that formula there. I don't want to have to change that. But I don't like the way that looks. So I'm going to label that just a little bit differently and put it on 2 lines instead. So I can just put Behring recommended data. For a 5-day inventory. Okay, made a mistake when I typed up here. I'm going to just correct that. Another way you can correct, I just did it without even explaining it. Up here I had, just a second ago, I had accidentally typed that in there. Another way that you can correct data, and I do it quite a bit, is you can click on the cell that you want, hit F2, and it puts you at the end of the cell. So that's what I did. I hit F2. You can try that. But you can always come up here in the formula bar, correct it. You can double click anywhere in here to correct something. I could have clicked over here at the end of this, and clicked up here and got that to change as well. So just different ways to do corrections. And I need to turn all of that purple so it matches. Since I had used purple was my last color, it will just choose that as well. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and change that to be a border around the whole thing. And I kind of have a border in here already, so I'm going to fix this, and I'm going to tell it no border, and it got rid of all of that border because I was getting one in the middle of it, and then I'm going to just click outside borders. Alright, so the more you work with Excel, you start learning these different tricks. Alright, finally, so that looks better. I like the way that looks. Alright, so now I'm going to go into step 9, and it tells me that I need to create another spreadsheet and copy in the demand spreadsheet that I have. So I'm going to create another tab, so I can come down here, click on Insert Worksheet, and I'll get another tab. And I need to call that tab Actual Demand, so I'm going to double click it and rename it Actual Demand. Alright, remember earlier in the lesson we brought down that other file that we needed from Blackboard, and so this is actually the spreadsheet that I'm going to copy into that other tab sheet. So there's a way that you can do that. I'm going to come up here in this corner. I could either click and hold and drag all the way down, but it's a big worksheet. There's almost 1,000 lines in here. So I don't really want to do it that way. It takes a long time to highlight it, as you saw. So I can grab it all at once. By getting in the corner here, there's a little blank corner above the A, to the side of the A, and above the 1. So I'm going to click there, and when I do that, it highlights the whole worksheet. Then I can right click and copy, and then I can go back to back to my other worksheet that I was working in. Here I am in my Actual Demand, and I can do the same thing. I can click on that, right click, and paste. And it pasted in exactly the way it looked from that other spreadsheet. So I don't need that other spreadsheet anymore. I'm going to open that up just so I don't get confused, and I'm going to file and close it. Alright, now I'm back in my original worksheet. You can see that I have my 4 tabs down here at the bottom, and I'm working in Actual Demand, and I just copied that information into a new tab of my workbook. Alright, on step 10, they want us to summarize this data. So if you remember, I told you this is a pretty big worksheet of information. So there's almost 1,000 lines in here. When I scroll down, I can see I'm on line 992. So this represents the different parts that were shipped every day, and they're wanting to track what's happening with that. And people actually do this because it gives you some good information as you're working in a business. So if you look on page 160, it kind of sets up the table for you on how that needs to look. So I'm going to pause this video and get this table set up. Alright, so you should have taken a minute and created this table. That's table 2.15 that's on page 160 of your text. And so it's asking us to find the number of items shipped for all of these different types of parts. They also want us to calculate the total dollar value of the items shipped for each of those parts, and the average number of days that it was held in inventory for each of those parts. So we're going to use some formulas to do that. And then finally in step 11, we need to make a recommendation based on what we discover when we calculate all of this information. So what I'm going to do is I need the number of items shipped. Now that would be pretty darn hard if I were to look at 1,000 lines of data trying to find how many times did I ship bearings. So there's a formula in Excel that helps you do that. We've used that already, I believe. And that is the COUNTIF function. So I'm going to say I want you to count in this set of data how many times bearings occurs. And so the way that we do that, I'm going to type in a function equals count if, and then I'm going to open up my parentheses, and I can double click this actually. I was going to type it by hand, but I'll double click this, and I get count if, open parentheses, And then I have to tell it what range of cells do I want it to look at as it counts those instances. So I'm looking for the word bearings, and then I have to tell it the range. So I want to look for the word timing belt, or I'm sorry, bearings in this whole set of data. How many times did I send a shipment of bearings? So I have to get all the way down to the bottom. I'm clicking, holding from the top to the bottom. Come back up here so you can see it. So I selected A2 all the way down to A998, whatever it was, and then I'm going to hit comma. So A2 to A992, and then I hit comma, and it tells me I need the criteria. So the criteria that I'm looking for is F2, so the word bearings. So count if A2 to A992, how many times does bearings occur? And then I can close my parentheses and hit enter. And it tells me that bearings occurred 322 times. So you can see how this is extremely useful. So I'm going to do that all the way for, I'm going to do that for the timing belts, air filters, fan belt, and the electronic board. Alright, so I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to hit equals count if, and I'll double click on count if, and then do the same thing. I'm going to show you a different trick when I do this again. I don't have to keep highlighting all of that. Hit a comma, and then this time I want it to reference timing belts. Oops, it doesn't know what I'm doing. I'm going to start over. I'm going to hit escape to start over. Alright, I need to get that range again. I'm going to do that again. Okay, hit enter. I messed up. It isn't liking what I'm doing here. Let me try it again. I'm going to just type it in, A2 to A992, then I need a comma, and I want it to look at timing belts this time. Close my parentheses and hit enter. Alright, something happened here. A2 to A992, I have a dot there instead of a comma, so I need that to be a comma, and it should work better. There we go. So that was 199 instances. Alright, I could have done this in the first one. I want to show you. So you can see how time consuming that is to do each one individually. So I can copy this down and then just change that cell reference. But I need to keep this intact when I do that. So I'm going to change that A2 to A992, and I'm going to turn it into an absolute value. And I'm actually going to turn it into a mixed cell reference. So it will retain, let me move from A to B as I look at all of these different things, but it will retain the cell references 2 to 992. I'm going to hit enter. And now watch, I had just done this formula, but I'm going to show you how I could have copied that instead and just copy that down. Then you'll notice that it went from, I had up here, I had F2, and when I copied it, it went to F3. But it retains the 2 to the 992. And I'm going to copy that all the way down. So a much faster way to do that. And each time it's changing that cell reference. It's going to F4, so I'm getting this one. When I click in here, I'm getting F5, so it's going to fan belt. And then F6, it's looking at electronic board. Alright, next we need to determine the total dollar value of all items shipped. So I'm going to write a formula for that, and I'm going to use the SUMIF formula. And this time I'm going to type it and explain it as I'm typing it. So I'm going to hit equals SUMIF, open parentheses, and I want it to sum if I have the word bearings in here, and then the value is this right here. So you're going to give it some criteria to look at when you're looking at SUMIF, and you can see the help here. SUMIF, I put a range in there, what is the criteria, and then I give it a range of what range do I want to add together. So sum if, open parentheses, you're going to see how to type in a formula here again. I'm going to put a $2 and then all the way to I'm sorry, all the way from a $992, and then I put a comma. So I'm following this example here that it gives you this help. Sum if the range, so the range is A2 to A992, and then notice the comma. So then I have to put a comma, and then I have to put some sort of criteria. And the criteria is F2. I want it to be bearings, F2. So sum if, in that cell of values, I find the word bearings, and then I'm going to put a comma again, and I'm going to give it the range that I want it to sum. In this case, it's going to be B with the $2, so I'm doing a mixed cell reference so I can copy this thing, B2 to B992. So I'm going to put my colon to B $992, so there's my range, and I'm going to close my parentheses and hit enter. And so I get a value of this. Now once again, because we didn't use 100 simulations in our simulation, once again, you should get the same data as me. I'm getting confused here. Alright, so because I used those values there, I can copy this formula down because I used my mixed cell references in this whole formula. I can copy this down. So let's look at this formula one more time. I'm telling it to use the function sum if A2 to A92 equals bearings. So I use the comma F2, telling it to look at the value that's in F2, and if that in that cell of range has bearings, then I put another comma, then I want you to sum for each of those instances the values that are in column B. So B2 to B92, close parentheses, and you get your result. Now I can copy that thing down as well. Alright, and you'll notice when I copied it down that I anchor my column A, but I did not put it for F2. It moved to F3 because I didn't anchor F2, and it stayed with the anchor of B, of column B. I can move down to the next one, look at my formula, and you can see that everything stayed the same, but it moved on down to air filters. So that's what you would see in each of these formulas if I clicked on each one of those. Now I can calculate the average number of days held in inventory, and I can copy this formula over. Okay, actually when I look at that formula, it probably won't work well to copy it, so I'm just going to recreate it. Alright, so we're going to do the same sort of idea to calculate the average number of days held in inventory. So this time I'm going to use the click and point method instead of typing in the formula, so you can see different ways to do that. So I'm going to start the formula by typing equals sum if, and there it is, and it gives me my hints on how I need to create this. It has the open parentheses. So I need to click on cell A2 and go all the way down to A992. So I can do that pretty quick. If you hold your mouse and just kind of hold it down towards the bottom, it will go through there very quickly. So A2 to A992, and then hit comma. I keep doing that wrong. Hit and I don't like the click and hold method when you've got a large amount of data. It gets confusing. Actually, I'm going to start that over. Alright, I'm going to try the click and point method one more time. I quite often, when I have a large spreadsheet, I will just jot down the numbers so I can just type them in by hand. I find that faster that way. But we're going to try the click and point method again. So I'm going to type equals sum if, and I'm going to click that function, open parentheses, and I need to sum it. I'm looking for bearings, so I need column A. So I'm going to click and hold and go all the way to the bottom of the spreadsheet. Alright, then my formula, I put in the range, and you'll notice there's a comma. So I'm going to type a comma, and then I have to put in the criteria. And the criteria in this case, I need to go up to the top. So I've got my sum if, column A, for all of the cells in column A, and I wanted to look at just bearings. So there's my criteria, is bearings, so it's G2. No, I'm sorry, I don't want G2. I actually want the cell reference of F, bearings. So you can see how I was able to correct that just right there. I just backspaced and chose a different cell, and I haven't lost the formula there. So now I need to tell it what range of cells I want it to sum. So I have sum if what's in column A is equal to bearings, then I can tell it what do I want to sum, and in this case it's the range of inventory. So I have to put a comma again, because you'll notice in my help I have the criteria, which is F2, and then there's a comma. Then I need a range that I'm going to sum. So I'm going to put a comma and then highlight the range in column C. So C2 all the way to the bottom of all of that data. Alright, so I have that, and I need to close my parentheses. I'm going to come up here so you can see the formula, and it's also building up here, you can see it. And then I need to divide that by, because I need an average, the number of days that it's the average of the number of days held in inventory. So here I have the number of items shipped, and so I want to reference that to get the number in order to get the average, and then I can hit enter to accept that. So let's look at that formula one more time. Once again, you can type it all in by hand. A lot easier when you have a huge spreadsheet, just to know what the cell references are and to type it by hand. Now I made a mistake, because I want to be able to copy this formula down. I need those to be absolute values, not everything. I need this to be an absolute value, so I'm going to put a mixed cell reference there in front of the A. This time, instead of using my F4, I'm just clicking in the formula and putting the dollar signs where I need them. And I need it on cell on the C column as well. I need a mixed cell reference there, and I'm going to put it there. Alright, so let's look at that formula now. I'm going to hit enter, come back up to look at it. So now I'm going to sum if everything that's in column A is equal to F2, which the word is bearings. So it's going to look for the word bearings, and then the comma means and then I want you to sum what's in column C for anything that has bearings with it. So you can see how that works. Then to get the average, I need to divide that by the number. And so that's 322, because we calculated the number in column G, so I can just use that as the reference. Alright, since I have that and I have my mixed cell references in there, I can now copy that down. And that completes that part of the homework assignment. Okay, finally, on step 11, something I want you to notice here. This is an average number of days held in inventory. And you see how there's a dollar sign with this? We need to reformat that, because days doesn't have anything to do with dollars. The reason it did that is because we used, it was looking at the value, here in one of the other formulas. So I'm going to just reformat that. And I'm going to just turn that into a comma instead, because it shouldn't have a dollar sign in front of it. It's referring to days, not dollars. Alright, finally on step 11, it wants us to analyze that it says based on the recommended inventory level you previously calculated for the bearings, would you have enough bearings in the warehouse to cover these orders? So we're looking at just bearings, and if you remember in simulation data 1 we had calculated a bearing recommended data 5-day inventory. Now this was a recommended data 5-day inventory. This was just for bearings here, and it returned a result of 82, but that's just for 1 day. So I need to go in and multiply that times 5. So I'm going to multiply that times 5 to get a 5-day need. And so that 5-day need it actually is 410 that I would be holding in inventory. So I'm going to go back to my actual demand spreadsheet. And remember I calculated 410 here. And I can see that I shipped 322. So did I have enough in my inventory? The answer is yes. So you just need to indicate your answer there. And so type the question, would for 5 days. That's the question, and then I'm just going to answer that, and I'm going to just say the 5-day inventory of 410 is greater than the number shipped of 322. So yes, there was enough inventory. Now I'm just typing that like I'm typing in Word, but I actually hit enter after the word was so I can move down to another line. Different ways to do things. So I'm going to highlight that answer. Maybe I'll put it up here. And I like to put things in boxes, so I'm going to draw a border around it and I'm going to turn it blue. I like blue. Alright, so double check everything. I want you to notice that I could take this, keep this intact for all of these types of things that we're shipping. I could have a spreadsheet set up with all of this information, change my data here, and I could do an analysis whenever I wanted. All I would have to do is copy and paste from a spreadsheet where I was keeping the information. Most computer programs nowadays will do this kind of thing for you, but if you had to build it, if you had a small business and you had to build it yourself, you can see how easily you could do that through the use of Excel. Alright, let's save our work. Always important to save our work. Double check everything, and then you need to go ahead, save that to a place you'll remember, and submit it for grading.